Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampitella. The day after Damien died, so I know I'm kind of bouncing a little bit here, but I wanted to come back to this. The day after my brother died, I was getting into the shower and I said out loud, Damien, if you're okay, I'd like for you, I want to know that you're okay. And I wasn't even sure what my after-death beliefs were at that point, but hey, I'm going to put that out there. So I'm sitting on the couch, I'm stirring this spaghetti that I wasn't going to eat, but there it was. My now ex-husband was laying on the couch. And all of a sudden, I wish I could truly put it into words, but I'll do it the best that I can. It's like my breath stopped. There was this pause in my breath. Not an uncomfortable pause, but this pause. And this amazing feeling washed over my body of peace and of love. And immediately I start crying. Like the tears aren't even like going down my face, they're like popping out in front of me. And I grabbed my then husband's leg and I went, oh my God, he's okay. He's okay. He's going to be okay. I could feel it. Now, did I make that up in my mind? I don't care. If I made it up in my mind, so be it. It made me feel better. I don't think I did. But if I did, okay, it's fine. A couple other extraordinary experiences that happened when he died is one that I'll never forget. And I'm telling you this because in another podcast, I'm going to be talking to you about linking objects, and this ties into it. I was having a dream. Now, when we were younger, as I told you, we were pretty poor. But once in a while, my mom would bring home brownie batter. Brownie, you know what I mean, brownie mix. And she would let me mix the brownie mix, and I'd be sitting there mixing the brownies. And my brother would come over and stick his fat ass finger in the brownie batter, and we get in some stupid fight. You know, don't do that. And he's running around, ha ha ha, and I'm running around trying to hit him with a spoon. But in this dream, I'm standing at my stove, and he's here on my right hand side, and I'm stirring brownie batter. And as I'm doing that, he comes over and sticks his fat ass finger in my brownie batter, and I get mad like that. But then I start laughing, and I have this I just hit him to the point. I can feel that right now on my arm. I kind of push him away with my arm, and I start laughing. And I had this amazing reparative experience with him in that moment. Something I wish I had had when he was alive. Brownies now have a whole different meaning to me. When you see a brownie in your, the 7-Eleven or Wawa or grocery store or whatever, you see chocolate yummy goodness. I hope you're seeing chocolate yummy goodness because chocolate is a food group and it should be there. But for me, I can see a brownie anywhere and immediately think of Damien. That becomes important later. That's a linking object. Something that connects me to my brother. It has become part of the ritual I do every single year on Christmas Eve as I'm planning for my ritual on Christmas Day. A couple other really cool dreams, very, very lucid to the point where I can give you every single detail. And was he there visiting me? Oh God, I hope so. Do I know that for sure? No, because I haven't died yet. So I don't know all the details of that. But I hope so. So, jumping ahead a little bit, seems like I think my mom gets sober when she moves out to the Midwest. She disappeared for a month. I ended up finding out that she was institutionalized during that time. My dad stayed back for a little while and then eventually followed her out there. He had still been using, but when he went out there, he actually sobered up as well. So I'm 26 at this time. So I guess it means that my dad was 46, 47. My mom was 45, 46, and started rebuilding their lives. And where they are now, I look forward to telling you about that. Where they are now is significantly different. And I remember I called my dad before. I said, hey, I'm going to tell this story. I want to tell my story to the people who are listening. Are you okay if I tell them this part of the story? And he said, that's not who we are anymore. It's okay if you tell your story. This is your story. And it's amazing that you survived it. So absolutely tell your story, because it's our story too. And we've been able to grow and heal through this story from, our own choices that we've made. I was very thankful for that. I didn't want to come here and tell you my personal story and omit a massive part of what played a role in what brought me to you here today. So I applied to one school for a doctorate program. And this is the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant International University, San Diego. It was the only one that had an accredited PsyD program. It's a doctorate in psychology, a PsyD program, that one of the options was an integrative emphasis, which is mind, body, spirit. Really looking at the whole person, which is absolutely exactly how I engage with the work that I do now with my clients, how I teach my students, and how I work with my trainees. And when I present, absolutely am really kind of nailing in that when you work with somebody who is bereft or traumatized, you cannot skip any of those, mind, body, or spirit. You can't. If anything's going to bring up spirituality or one's religious beliefs, it's going to be death and grief. Can't ignore that. So I applied to that program. My now ex-husband, he gets stationed at Pendleton, which is right there in San Diego. He got his orders on the exact same day I got my acceptance letter. I was like, oh, I guess we're moving to San Diego. Now, my ex-husband has a son who I always considered a son of mine, who unfortunately ended up struggling with his own drug addiction. But when we moved, there was a little bit of back and forth there, and I go up into my doctorate program. Now, there are a lot of other kinds of losses. One of the episodes that you're going to see is on non-finite losses, ambiguous losses, losses that aren't associated with death. When I moved there, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know how to get around. I did not know where my school was. I didn't know this house. I mean, loss upon loss that you don't even consider it, because this is an exciting time, right? I'm going to love this. I'm going to become a doctor, but exciting changes can be just as stressful as changes that are more difficult. So I go in, and I think I tell this story maybe in another podcast, I can't remember, but I'm going to say it anyway. I remember going to the grocery store and getting pissed off that in my mind, they put certain things in the grocery store in the wrong places, because the world revolves around me, and shouldn't you make sure that you have the bread and the milk and the butter and all that stuff in the same places that they did back in Pennsylvania? No? Okay, we're not doing that. Okay, I see how that is. So, Justin, I get into graduate school in this integrative program, and I am absolutely in love with school. It was everything I had hoped it was going to be. I fell in love with my cohort. I still have friends from my cohort, my very, very best friend from my cohort. During that time, I had already my master's degree from this other program, and I remember going up to the chair of my department and saying, I want to transfer some of my credits. He's like, well, you can transfer a year's worth of credits into this 5-year program. I said, I'm going to finish this program in 3 years. He goes, no, you're not. I said, I'm going to finish it. I don't want to be in school longer than 5 years. He goes, we have only had a couple people do that. And I'm like, well, I will be one of those people. It's like, okay. So I go into the program. They have an elective, death, loss, and grief. And I already started thinking about my dissertation. I knew I wanted to do a dissertation that included the death and the grieving process of adults surviving siblings. So I started kind of putting those pieces together. I also started being a teaching assistant again, because I absolutely loved doing that. and became involved with the integrative psychology program pretty deeply. And this was an incredibly healing time in my life. I ended up doing my dissertation on the use of nature-based rituals in the management of mourning for adult surviving siblings. For me, my spirituality is best when I'm out in nature. That is when I'm connected to that which is bigger than myself, the numinous, that which cannot be known. But boy, my God, that is really, really where I feel it. I don't care where people have their connection to their spirituality. It can be God, Allah, Buddha, a rock. You can have no necessarily religious belief, but you do have a belief that there's meaning in life. That's neither here nor there. I'm going to work with you with whatever belief system that you have. It's fine. But I knew that was where my belief system, lied. So I ended up doing my dissertation, interviewing many, about 8 individuals who were adult surviving siblings who are at different places in their lives in terms of when they lost their sibling. Some people, it was relatively new. Other people, one person had been over 30 years, all of which who still had pretty strong feelings. And they developed their own nature-based ritual to find a way of being able to transform and engage with their grieving process in a different way so that they could move forward in their grieving process. So like I said, I fall in love with death, loss, and grief, and I went, yeah, this is what's going to be my specialty. I knew it in that graduate program. Unfortunately, my marriage did not last, and I think it was probably hard when somebody's gone 2/3 of your marriage. It's hard to remain connected. He's a great person. We were sad about that. We held hands in court. We're like, God, this sucks. I remember the judge saying, have you guys, separated out all your things? Yeah, we separated out all our things. We figured out the money stuff. Okay, that's fine. And the judge looked at me and he goes, you do know you can have access to half of his pension. And I'm like, well, why would I do that? I didn't work for it. He goes, yeah, but you're not making the same income. I'm like, I am not taking away the pension of somebody who worked his entire life towards making his pension. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to make my own money. And I remember him saying to us, my God, I wish that more people would walk in here figuring that out. And you're right, because divorce is sticky and messy and grief related and sometimes trauma related. But I had a really amicable divorce. Now, it was hard for Dylan, my stepson. I absolutely loved Dylan. Me and his mom got along really well. Dylan and I loved each other very much. So this kind of broke him apart, which I think eventually led to some of the drug use that he engaged in. So I am working in private practices. I am doing neuropsychological testing. I am doing individual testing. I'm doing lots of therapy. I'm working in 2 practices in order to do that. I got licensed. The day after I got licensed, I started a private practice. I knew I wanted to do that. When I started a private practice, I also took on the position. I got a call from the school that I graduated from. And they're like, hey, the chair of the department of the integrative program is going on sabbatical. Do you want to come on as a professor and run the doctorate, that part of the doctorate program? Yeah, this is a rhetorical question, right? Like, of course I'm going to do that. So while I'm running a private practice, I'm also a full-time assistant professor at this doctorate program, which I already love teaching, but teaching at this level, you got to be kidding me. So I'm running this practice, and the sabbatical was done after about a year. They kept me on for about 1.5 years. And then because it was a contracted position, I knew that contract was going to be ending, and applied to become a professor at another university, which I received that and became an assistant professor there and was doing some research. In the interim, I am presenting all over the United States, all on topics about death, loss, and grief. And just knowing that, and I started figuring this out. If I'm going to have to suffer the loss of Damien and all of these other losses, I have choices. One of those choices is, what am I going to do with this pain? What am I going to do as I'm trying to weave these losses into my narrative so that I'm not stuck in my grief and stuck in my trauma? I'm not saying I would do anything to get that back, but I'm not getting that back. So now what am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to try to make meaning out of it. How do you make meaning out of stuff that doesn't really seem to inherently have any meaning? I have to assign meaning to it. The only thing, I can't change the past. The only thing I can do is assign different meanings to what happened in the past. And in that way, it does change it. It doesn't change the fact that it happened. It changed my relationship to it. So for me, presenting, becoming a clinician, to really working with people with death, loss, grief, and trauma, teaching these death, loss, and grief classes, other kinds of classes like where I could, really weave in these concepts. These became ways of making meaning and making sense out of the loss of Damien. I don't do what I do because of Damien. I do what I do through Damien. This is through him. I don't know how to, boy, if I could let you inside even deeper so you could feel that. I can feel that in my body. As I continue to build my life and to restructure, to reconstruct my story, my parents have also been able to do that. They have healed. They have figured out who they are now. They have found stability, sobriety, ever since my brother died. I am incredibly proud of my parents for being able to do this. And they survived this. I survived them, and they survived this. And my father creates music, and he loves it, and he's great at it. My mother creates that support for him, and they are just amazing human beings. So I want to make sure that you understand, as part of my story, it wasn't just about me healing, but it was about my family healing together. My sister struggling with her own losses and her own addiction, and getting to a place where she now has also found peace and sobriety. And that has brought us, we're lucky that we've been able to do that, because we each had our own individual process to get there, but also have been able to stay cohesive as a family. And I'm glad to know that I'm able to have a different relationship with them to this day. When I'm out in San Diego, and then I'm no longer, I'm full-time faculty. I opened up a group practice because, I have all this spare time. I'm playing softball all the time. I mean, forget it. Lots of friends. And I thought it was a really good, healthy time in my life. In couple relationships. End up getting remarried to somebody. We should have stayed friends. Again, another amicable divorce. And but sad nonetheless. I had this potential future that I then had to let go of. Ended up being healthier for both of us, for sure. And again, there was no anger. It was, maybe we should have stayed friends. Yeah, maybe we should stay friends. So here I am in San Diego, beautiful San Diego, which, by the way, you can't buy a house in San Diego, even if you're a doctor. In case you're wondering, go visit. It's beautiful. You're not going to afford anything. Plus, you have like little postage stamps worth of land. So that didn't really quite work for me, although the nature part of it really, really worked for me. So I had told my friends back here in Delaware, I'm moving back. And they're like, you're not moving back. This is 2014. You're not moving back. Of course you're not moving. I'm moving back. So I pick up everything and I move back. I had some support systems here. I had some ideas of what I was going to do. I left the full-time professorship and decided to teach adjunct because, I got to be honest with you, I don't know if any of you guys are working in academia, but the politics and the drama, no, thank you. I like the teaching part. Let me do that. So I come back here to Delaware in 2014 and decide that I'm going to do all of my work via telehealth with my California clients. I could continue to work with them. I'm still licensed there. I still see clients in California. I end up meeting who ends up being my business partner at my other group practice. It's called Integrative Psychology Group. And we meet each other. And it's very serendipitous. And, I kind of think that the universe pulls together some stuff that you maybe weren't thinking was on its way. And liked each other right away. Started this little practice where she had her room, I had my room, and then we had like a psych assistant. Grew out of that space faster than you could blink an eye. And I was up on Craigslist. I was trying to, maybe there's other places that we could rent. Now, mind you, we were still in the lease, but hey, whatever, I'm going to make this happen. And find this location. It's like perfect, beautiful location. So I go back to work one day and I'm like, all right, Michelle, tell me you love me. She's like, what? I'm like, nah, just tell me you love me. Okay, well, I love you. Okay, that good. Now, I got news for you. I found the place where we need to move. The bad news is we're going to have to break this lease. We're going to have to figure it out. Come with me. I want to show it to you. Well, sure enough, yep, that's where we were. That's ended up what we doing. But no, that is what we ended up doing, is that we moved to this location and built it out into a group practice. And to this day, I still have Integrative Psychology Group. Now, this is 2016 now, September 2016. So a good 6 years. Where are I? 2022. All right, you do the math. I stink at math. I skipped statistics whenever I could. So you're good. So we open up this group practice. We end up having to build out a whole nother side of the group practice. Not really a specialty practice in death, loss, and grief, but for me, it very much was still, that's what I was doing. Psychological assistants and psychologists and social workers, and she does neuropsych assessments and psychological assessments. I was doing learning disability and ADHD assessments. I mean, it was a great time in my life. While all of that is happening, I'm in a relationship with somebody here. With whom I am currently and still married to, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a bit. And it's thriving, just thriving. And I'm presenting everywhere at this point. I am teaching at 3 different universities. I mean, the richness of my life, the meaning and the purpose behind what I was doing, because it's one thing to have a career. It's another thing to figure out the meaning behind your career, to understand who you are and how you are impacting the world. See, for me, losing Damien was one thing, but if I can do stuff with it, the changes that ripple out, not only from my clients and their changes and how they ripple out, but even from the people and the students, people in my presentations and the students, and I get emails, oh my God, you have no idea. Presenting for organizations like PESI, the continuing education organizations, presenting for different state organizations, psychological places. I mean, just everywhere. While I'm going through all of this, I get certified as a thanatologist through the Association for Death Education and Counseling, which is quite a certification. You have to meet a lot of criteria, take a test, then get awarded a fellow of Thanatology, again, a FED, which is the highest level of specialist in death, loss, and grief that you can attain. So presenting at those conferences as well. And we're going along. 2019 rolls around. I'm at this point thoroughly into my relationship with my husband, my now husband. He's got 3 kids, 3 boys. I call them the Delaware wrecking crew because they're 3 boys and they're teenagers. And oh my God, why do they smell like this? I understand hormones are involved and I know that the rooms are clean, but I cannot walk by without my eyes watering. And I'm looking at my husband, these 3 teenagers now, right? I got 2 male cats and I look at my female dog and I'm like, girl, this is just you and me. This is me and you against whole other people. My animals are my favorite people in my house. I say that all the time. My husband's going to see this, and I'm hoping he knows that I'm kidding. Well, kind of. Yep, I'm kidding. And 2019 rolls around and my business partner's like, you really need to make a specialty organization. I'm like, oh, well, I can't do that right now. And she goes, one step at a time, one client at a time. So I do it. July 2019. In the space where the group practice was, I took over a few of those offices and began hiring people. And the influx of people who need help in their grief, who need help with their trauma. I mean, such a demand. I ended up poaching one of my clinicians that worked for IPG, Integrative Psychology Group. Poached them after I created the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy. So built up some steam. COVID hits. This doesn't stop. Matter of fact, it continued to grow even more because people had lots of kind of losses: death, jobs, relationships, mental health, homes, a sense of safety and security, all the different losses that were coming with COVID. So everything went online. In the interim, I'm hiring more people, and it's rolling and it's rolling and it's building. And then, running 2 group practices. All right. So I'm teaching throughout this whole time as well, and presenting. So 2020, 2021, come around 2021, a friend of mine told me about the space that I am talking to you from right now. He talked me into buying the place in the middle of COVID. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And it ended up being a really, really good deal. And I gutted the entire place. I even took the studs out and rebuilt the whole place. So it was purchased in June, and we opened up December of 2021. And today is September 9th, I think, 10th of 2022. So we've been open since then. We are an incredibly busy organization. I've got 7 clinicians who have different specialties. Some people specialize in suicide, some specialize working with children, others are an art therapist. Myself, I work with adults and generalized grief, loss, and trauma. We are specialized in EMDR, which is a type of intervention. In the interim of all of this, I got certified in another type of approach to therapy, which is grief therapy as meaning reconstruction. I fortunately was the only one in North America, was the first one in North America to receive that certification. I became certified also in treating complicated grief, which there's nobody in Delaware who's actually trained in that. And my employees are building up, becoming certified in Thanatology. They're all trained in EMDR. In the interim, I work with my marketing company, and they just start helping me build. And I'm like, oh my God, the expense of this. It's the best choice I ever made in terms of my organization, aside from actually buying the space and hiring people. Would never have been able to do it. That's not a plug for them. That's just a reality. Becoming a business owner, nobody teaches you how to do that in graduate school at all. Zero. You just kind of go in here, you wing it. Maybe you read some books. The books don't know what the hell they're talking about, not in mental health. And here we are, right? I am fortunate enough to be able to say I have found meaning and purpose. I have shifted who I am in relation to the world. When my narrative shattered over and over and over again, I found ways with the help of therapy. Don't get me wrong. I've been in therapy since I was 26 years old. I will never leave therapy. I love therapy. Pulling the pieces of your life together every single time allows you to try to understand yourself a little bit more, and you go into post-traumatic growth. I've had tremendous post-traumatic growth. I am sure I have traumatized my therapist with vicarious traumatization. But what I do now, the meaning and purpose I have in my life, the additional losses that I experience along the way, it's in such a different context now where I am developmentally. And coming to you right now through this podcast, this is a huge step. Huge step. I can present, I can talk to a camera like nobody's business. I can work with people. I can in front of a room. I literally have presented in front of a room of thousands of people. I can do all this, but a podcast, that's got a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of vulnerability, but there is so much to talk about. There's so much silence in our culture. We have this death-denying culture. We stick our heads in the sand about it. And it's not just about death, but about all the other losses that we don't even tell ourselves we're allowed to grieve. We don't even recognize that the grieving process is happening. And that's what I'm here for. That's what this podcast is about. I want to shine light on these losses. I want to shine light on our grieving process. I want to shine light in letting you know that your grieving process is seen, that you can grieve in the way that you grieve, that you can find purpose in the losses that you've had, but you don't have to do that. And there's no time frame for that. And that you'll learn about grief, you'll learn about trauma, and you'll try to figure out, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for the people around me that I love? Or what I see in our society? How is this going to impact? This is a whole, yes, I understand that there's a whole thing about where I've gone in my career, where I've been able to heal, and what I've been able to do with the tragedies and the losses in my life. It's not that those things aren't there. It's not like those things don't have pain associated with them when I reflect back on them. They still exist. But my ability to integrate it into my life has gotten me to the point where I'm talking to you right now. And I hope you're going to find something in this podcast that'll bring you a sense of understanding, of engagement, and of integration in your losses and in your trauma. I have a lot of topics. There's a lot going on there. And so I look forward to being able to share that with you as I continue my journey and you continue yours. Thank you for watching today.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who's experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.